Hi, I'm Sam Nurnberg, and I don't know how to film an intro to a Mario Galaxy video. This is a serious problem and not a cop-out. By my estimate, upwards of 90% of all games journalism has made some piece of content talking about some aspect of Mario Galaxy in some serious level of detail. And because of this, every intro to the game has already been made and probably already viewed by you. I could sit here and talk about how it's my favorite game from my childhood. I could tell you how it was the first time I was ever immersed in a game, but you probably just heard that on Jacob Geller's channel. So I don't really see the point, and I think that to even try would be kind of insulting to the people who have already gone before me. So the intro to this video is just going to be me stating the facts of this video's production as sincerely as I possibly can. I promise we'll get to the swimming stuff soon. I didn't set up all these lights for nothing. Just give me a minute and we'll get there. Mario Galaxy was the second video game I ever played in my life. Since that moment, I have beaten Mario Galaxy roughly 10,000 times. About half of that 10,000, about 5,000 of that 10,000 would have been in my childhood, where I replayed the game from beginning to end pretty much every week. After that, though, I became a speedrunner, where I learned to speedrun various games to completion. And it took me a little bit to get around to Mario Galaxy, but when I started speedrunning Mario Galaxy, I played it just that much more. During all of this time, my appreciation for Mario Galaxy grew to a point. And then after that point, it became a plateau of complacency. Of course, Mario Galaxy is good. It's Mario Galaxy, and this is sort of the standard assumption here on the internet. Basically, everybody knows that Mario Galaxy is a good game. And because of this, certain aspects of it don't need to be talked about. You know, we don't need to talk about the music. We don't need to talk about the physics engine. All of these things are really cool, and we all know that. And so, after a time of speedrunning the game and having played it, so much that I pretty much thought I knew everything about it, I was complacent with Mario Galaxy. I obviously had positive opinions of it, but they were the obvious kind of opinions, which is why this video is negative. Turns out, pretty much every positive aspect of Mario Galaxy has been discussed to death. But there is a problem with Mario Galaxy. One that hasn't been talked to death. In fact, as far as I can tell, it hasn't been talked about at all. And that's Mario Galaxy's swimming mechanics. The last time I played through Mario Galaxy was actually after I had basically quit speedrunning the game for a while. So it was a fresh return to casual type experience. The day of this casual playthrough that I get to the kitchen, which is where the first swimming level of Mario Galaxy appears, Beach Bowl Galaxy, I maybe had just been playing too long, or I had a bad day for some other reason, but I was kind of looking for something to be upset about. And so when I jumped in the water, things that I had noticed and sort of had subconsciously noted over my years of playing this game boiled over. It all became coherent in my mind for the first time, and I wrote a thread on Twitter. Now, writing a thread on Twitter is sort of like the worst way to get to the true emotional core of what you mean. You write one tweet, abandon it. You write another tweet, you abandon it. And as you go and you get closer and closer to some kind of conclusion, you just get angrier and angrier. And I was literally like shouty caps at the end of this thread, which I have never shouted at Mario Galaxy before. Although I will shout here in a minute. So, prepare yourself. I'm not proud of that thread. I don't really agree with all of its sentiments, but its criticism of the game still stands. Please bear with me as I try to convey both the physical criticism and the emotional sentiment behind that thread. Okay, we can pretty much get started now. Part 1. Doggy paddle. Okay, let's pretend things aren't going to get complicated for a minute. Let's just do some nice, normal games journalism. I have a couple of problems with the swimming mechanics in Super Mario Galaxy. We'll talk about those in a minute. First, I would like to talk about the positives. Outside of your basic controls underwater, which are terrible, you do have a couple of ways to move around. The first is shells, which we will talk about in just a bit, and the second is the spin. The spin is Mario Galaxy's central mechanic. It's this game's flood, or Cappy, and it's basically just the default way that you're able to manipulate Mario's movement in the game. On the ground, we like the spin. The spin is great. It makes the platforming more diverse. It has a really good kinetic feedback. You know, when you spin and you hit the crystal, it really feels like you're hitting a crystal. So that's good. We like the spin. Underwater, instead of the spin letting you float in the air for just a second, the spin propels you forward. So you shake the Wii remote and you spin a little bit forward. On its own, one by one, I actually do like this mechanic. That's why it's here. The problem with the spin is that the devs didn't really think about how you would realistically use the spin. There's no cooldown on the spin. So the fastest way to move around underwater, albeit without a shell, is to constantly shake the Wii remote. For a variety of reasons, which we will talk about later, controlling Mario underwater is not very easy. And to do all of this while shaking the Wii remote constantly is honestly kind of a nightmare. You have to do this constantly. I don't even like doing this bit for the filming. I wish I had chosen to do something else. Now, this is a problem that I believe the devs did foresee. It's not completely without a solution in the game. They try to balance the use of the spin by having the spin consume air. Now, the air meter as a mechanic is not something that we'll be talking about very much in this, the only video on Mario Galaxy swimming mechanics. The air meter is fine. It's an air meter. Some games forego the air meter in their underwater sections, or otherwise represent it with dramatic changes in the music. In Mario Galaxy, you do have an air meter. It doesn't feel good to get punished for not moving efficiently in this wet hell, but, you know, sometimes it creates cool gameplay moments. If you're about to drown and you save yourself, it's cool. If you're about to drown and you drown, it's pretty cool. So I don't mind the air meter at all, actually. But as a balancing tool for the spin, the air meter is woefully inadequate. The spin consumes basically no air. Anybody, casual or otherwise, can pretty much spin as much as they want without ever needing to worry about air. The fact that you consume a little more air when you spin is made up for tenfold by the fact that you get to the next source of air that much quicker. So the spin is pretty inadequately balanced with Mario. Somehow, when you're playing as Luigi, the spin is completely fixed. Luigi has terrible lungs. That guy can't swim at all. His air meter decreases faster overall, but it also decreases much faster when you use the spin. This is the appropriate balancing decision. If you're a speedrunner and you know exactly where to go, then this handicap won't stop you very much. But for casual players who are likely just looking around underwater, this forces them to use the spin more restrictedly. And that means that they're not going to be shaking the Wii remote all the time. It's a great change. Okay, so the spin has a couple of problems, but it's not a big deal. In fact, it's completely solved in one whole version of the game. So we can move on to the other nice thing that I have to say about Mario Galaxy. So shells are not a mechanic. Shells are a collection of mechanics, and we're going to talk about most of the shell mechanics later in this video, in the problem section. But there is one part of the shell that I love. I would like to show you my favorite animation in Mario Galaxy. Ooh, one more time? One more time? Okay, now 3 times really fast next to each other. Excellent. Thank you very much. The spin shell grab is perhaps the best animation in all of Mario Galaxy. You shake the Wii remote next to a shell, and the shell spins slowly and beautifully along a calculated physics arc all the way around Mario until it finally zeroes in on his arms. This is unbelievably satisfying, and basically makes up for everything we're about to talk about. They killed it. You should get a game award for sound design exclusively for this sound effect. Whoa, I almost just fell out of my shoes. I'll also add that the way that they introduce this mechanic to you is game design genius. In the star, passing the swim test, we are tasked with finding this gold shell. We land in the level. We walk up to Coach. We ask him if we can join the swim test. After you talk to Coach, you jump in the water, and immediately you see it. There's a bunch of penguins doing their swim test, and the guy in the front has the shell. There's no other way around it. You're gonna have to take it from him. And the only way that you know to catch up to a penguin moving that fast is to start shaking that Wii remote. So you get up to him, you're shaking the Wii remote, and by the time you're close enough to him to even do anything, you automatically grab the shell because you're already doing the thing you're supposed to do. By forcing you to shake the Wii remote to catch up with these guys, they instantly teach you this mechanic and show you this really cool animation. Wow, that's like 1-1. All right, next we have nothing. Can you believe it? That is all the positives I have to say about Mario Galaxy. There is literally just 2, and half of one of them was talking about problems. I swear I'm not a deeply negative person, but we do have to get onto the problems now. There's no other way around it. I have to show you what I found. Part 2, intermediate swimming concept that I can't think of. Backstroke? Backstroke. Part 2, the backstroke. So obviously we've already talked about all of the nice things that I have to say about the swimming mechanics in Mario Galaxy. Everything from here on is somehow wrong. We're not quite to the demon core of Mario Galaxy, but we are approaching it. For now, let's just talk about the rest of the shell mechanics, because unfortunately, grabbing the shell is not the only thing you're allowed to do with the shell. First of all, when you're underwater, shaking the controller usually does the spin, which is our favorite move. So while shaking the controller usually accelerates you underwater, when you're holding a shell, shaking the controller gets remapped to throw the shell. There's no way around it. This is hilarious. Most people in that passing the swim test level we just talked about, after grabbing the shell, immediately shook the controller again and threw the level objective right into the wall. This is too funny for me to seriously complain about, but it is a pretty good example of the incongruity of expectations between what you think an action will do and what the action will actually do. So it's a good way for us to start talking about these problems, because yeah, you would expect shaking the controller to move you forward faster through the water because that's what it had been doing. But now it's mapped onto a completely different action, and they didn't tell you that that was going to happen. Okay, now this next bit doesn't actually have a lot to do with shells on its own, but you'll see how it connects in just a minute. When you're underwater in Mario Galaxy, you have no camera control. That on its own is probably objectively a flaw, but it compounds really interestingly with some other things that we'll talk about in a minute. So let's put a pin in that, and let's talk about the key shell mechanic, which is auto acceleration. When you're holding a shell underwater, it will automatically propel you forward in the direction that you're currently facing. This is nice. It's smooth, it feels easy to control, and is a good experience for the most part. The problem with auto acceleration is that you don't always want to go forward. Eventually, you'll auto accelerate yourself into a corner or some other obstacle that you need to turn around, and in this situation, you can run into some problems. Fortunately, there is a mechanic for this. They decided that if you want to slow down when using a shell, you can press Z. This is great. It's cute. You get little brake lights on the back of your shell like a car. It's a shame it doesn't actually help you turn around though. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like the actual turning mechanics of the shell are broken in any way. They seem fine, pretty well tuned, honestly. The problem is the camera. When you slow down with a shell, you come to a stop and you want to turn around. So you start rotating the stick, you hold it left or hold it right, and Mario begins to spin, but the camera stays where it is. And now it will eventually try and move to Mario's back, but it is incredibly slow, much slower than the very slow turning of the shell. So as Mario spins, the camera stays where it is. And eventually, Mario is staring dead into the camera. And if this wasn't disorienting enough for you already, eventually, you're going to have to let go of Z and move in a different direction. And Mario, auto-propelled by the shell, swims directly into the camera. This is awful. It makes it so hard to navigate underwater, and literally any time I find myself in a corner with a shell, I have to blind shot myself into the camera, and it's just, why wouldn't you let me control the camera, or always have it at Mario's back, or anything? It's brutal, and it is uncomfortable, but it's seriously not that bad compared to the stuff that we have to talk about. This is just a camera problem, really, and they could fix this really easily. So, I'm not too upset about this kind of disqualifying mechanic with the shell. I think now we're ready to start talking about why Mario's base underwater movement feels so wrong to me. And at the core of everything, which we'll be talking about for the rest of this video, they have completely remapped Mario's controls for the underwater. It kind of makes sense. Underwater is a very different place than the ground, It makes sense that you would need different controls to navigate the space. They've given Mario what I call plane controls, which basically means that instead of accelerating by pushing the stick in a direction, you accelerate by pressing an acceleration button, and you angle Mario using the stick. So you hold forward on the stick, and that angles Mario forward. And if you hold backwards on the stick, it angles Mario backwards. So it's on its own, it's probably fine, but all of the problems start here. What I'm going to describe next is the disorientation attack. This is the starting jab that poisons 90% of my swimming interactions in Mario Galaxy. This is the normal way to swim, and it's also commonly destroyed by a single problem. Let's talk about it now. So most swimming in Galaxy starts deceptively well. You probably ground pound into the water because that's the easiest way to get going. It also angles Mario straight down towards the floor, which is convenient because that's the direction you want to go. Also, when Mario is angled forward like this, turning left and right probably feels responsive, and if you hold forward to try to move forward, it will only angle Mario further down, which is already where you're going. It's great. From here, things are normal. You press A to accelerate, and you get to swim around in the water. This is fun. Little red guy swimming all around. What secrets will he find? I hope he finds some. But eventually, just like with the shell, you'll get to a place where you need to stop and turn around. But unlike with the shell, this is Mario. You know how to control Mario. You've been playing the game for a couple of hours at this point probably, and you feel pretty in tune with Mario as a character. So you get into a corner, and naturally to turn around, you hold backwards. God, you have no idea how stupid you are, do you? You fucking idiot. You absolute moron. I can't believe that you fell into the trap that easily. Did you not forget that we're underwater? Holding backwards on the stick angles Mario upwards. And because you're so stupid, you probably accelerated too, because you wanted to go somewhere. So you hit A. And because you are angled up, Mario is now swimming straight for the surface. All because you wanted to turn around. This is all pretty funny, and on its own would be a horrible problem that I had to mention here. But part 2 of the disorientation attack is even funnier. Camera update, it has now moved to directly beneath Mario. Very helpful. Thank you, camera. So this is very concerning. It's not the direction you thought you'd be swimming in, but you think and you remember the way that you're supposed to swim. So the way you actually turn around underwater is by holding left or right. So you try that, you hold left or right. But you idiot, the camera is now underneath Mario. Holding left and right doesn't do anything. And now, as you watch Mario swim to the surface, spinning helplessly, you throw out a few more inputs. Maybe, like an animal, you try to flee the situation. You press A again. Well, I don't know why you thought that would work. You're still accelerating upwards. And again, maybe you try holding back on the stick just to see if you're insane. Well, maybe you are, but that doesn't change the fact that Mario's still accelerating upwards. It's usually at this point that I'm forced to completely stop and reassess, literally come up with a plan to start swimming again. The answer usually comes to me quickly. You can either ground pound to reorient Mario downwards, or you can hold the stick forward to angle Mario down. It's not that hard if you think about it, but I can't shake the taste out of my mouth. This game feels bad. Part 3. Freestyling. As thorough as I tried to be during my breakdown of the disorientation attack, we have still not gotten to my biggest complaint about Mario Galaxy Swimming. A problem so big and so hard to wrap my head around that it prompted me to not just try and understand Galaxy's failings, but try and understand uncomfortable design as a whole. This is the weirdest thing I've ever written about, so please bear with me. We will get back to the funny swimming in a minute. Earlier, I mentioned the idea of kinetic immersion. It seemed like an apt descriptor for a concept that I didn't really know how to talk about at the time, but let's try and expand upon it here. The basic idea is that instead of, say, narrative immersion, which pulls you into the story through its use of character and writing, kinetic immersion pulls you into the story through its use of physics and space. And I'm trying to come up with a way to describe this that someone who isn't familiar with video games could understand, but it's really hard because no other medium can really achieve this effect. There comes a point where you're proficient enough in a game that it starts to feel like a natural extension of yourself. In the same way that most people don't think about how to walk, or chew their food, or tie their shoes, but still understand naturally what to do. This is part of a normal human ability to create instincts. It's a connection we all have to our senses that allows us to make decisions without thinking about it. And game designers can pull us into their games by playing on those senses. This is such an ethereal concept that has literally always been floating in the back of my mind while playing games, and I haven't had a way to describe it until working on this YouTube video, so I have to take a moment now to not only help myself figure things out, but hopefully explain this concept to you guys. So I got my Switch basically before anybody else in the general consuming audience. I was 7th in line at my local Best Buy, and because of the length of the line on release day, they ended up letting us in an hour early. So at 11 p.m., they let us into the Best Buy store to start moving people through the line. They just wouldn't let you leave with your Switch. So there, sitting on the floor of the Best Buy, I booted up into what would, for the next 3 months, basically be my life. I played so much Breath of the Wild. It was literally the only game I had on my Switch for multiple months, but I'll be damned if I didn't use my Switch every day. Breath of the Wild is a great game, and I can't believe I'm talking about maybe the 2 most video essayed games of all time in the same video. But here we are, it's important. Breath of the Wild is a great game, and it has a great physics engine. It actually has such a good physics engine that it prompted in me something that, up to that point, was completely unprecedented in my game playing career. I was walking outside. That's not the unprecedented thing. I go outside all the time. That's not the unprecedented thing. I was walking outside, and I live on like a decently sized hill, so I was walking back up to my house, and I got to the top of this hill, and unbelievably, I had the sensation to jump and open the paraglider, which, how did I have that instinct? The answer is that every day I had climbed a hill, jumped, and opened the paraglider. It's one of the simplest gameplay loops that you do in Breath of the Wild. You get to the top of a small hill and you jump and fly down the descent. It is so core to Breath of the Wild's movement and game design, but its physics engine was so immersive that in the real world, I felt that same sense of weight and presence and actually had the instinct to do the game thing. And now I didn't do like a Three Stooges pratfall because I tried to jump in the air and open a thing that didn't exist because I don't own a paraglider, but I did feel that urge, and it like shook me to my core, and I'm still thinking about it to this day. Breath of the Wild had actually gotten deep enough into my brain that I experienced a kind of phantom limb. I was trying to use a part of my body that was not there. So how can imaginary movements from a game map so cleanly onto our minds? I think that this has everything to do with a sense called proprioception. Now that word, proprioception, might have rung a bell for some of you. Maybe, if you're like me, you had some kid in the first grade tell you that there weren't just 5 senses, there were actually some secret other ones. And maybe you were that kid. I didn't listen to you, but I did look into it for this video, and it turns out that he was right. I'm not here to speak about any of the other potential extra senses. I'm here to talk about one, proprioception. Proprioception is literally everywhere and constantly happening and processing through your brain. The basic definition is that proprioception is your body's sense of where it is in space. It also technically gives you feedback on the weight of objects and maybe plays into some other more complicated things. I've basically just been generalizing it as your body's way of knowing where and what your body is. The other interesting thing is that while proprioception can function completely independently from other senses, it often relies on and distorts other sensory information. Proprioception works with your other senses in order to create what the limited research on this subject calls a body map. The body map is basically your brain's understanding of what physically constitutes your body. Your body map is built via actual sensors throughout your entire body, but it's also informed by visual memory and actually touching things. Your other senses contribute a great deal to what you actually know as your body map. Now, the body map isn't readily available to your conscious mind. It kind of just exists in the peripheries. You know, it's something that your body and senses use, but it's not something that you could imagine or download a 3D model of. The body map is not something you're allowed to think about. The concept of a phantom limb, for example, is heavily associated with your body map. The basic idea is that people who have lost a limb due to some kind of traumatic injury in their past may later in life experience sensation and even pains in a limb that is no longer there. Various forms of body dysmorphia are also believed to be heavily associated with the body map, in which the mind's understanding of itself does not match with the physical reality of the body. The basic idea that connects all of these things is that the body and mind separate and move in different directions. Some large events that drastically change your body may not appropriately update with your body map in conjunction at the exact same time. While something like a limb might be appropriately very hard to erase from your body map, the map itself is actually highly malleable. From the research that I looked at, it seems like there's a strong connection between motor movements and the constant generation and modification of your body map. And this is of course interesting because motor movements are the primary way that you engage with video games. My basic theory is that when we say a game feels good or feels bad, the place that that feeling comes from is proprioceptive. You become comfortable enough controlling Mario that your brain actually absorbs that little guy into your body map. I think Mario is literally treated the same way in your mind as a limb. It's something you can control and push through a 3D space. Now is as good a time as any to mention that all of this whole video, and all of my research and evidencing of my own physical experiences are colored by my autism. Oh, I stop. I am autistic, and part of autism is having, sometimes physically unfounded reactions to sensory input. And as I found out during my research, that extends to proprioceptive inputs. Some autistic children will literally throw themselves into walls because they love the raw proprioceptive feedback of it so much. Other autistic children will fear proprioceptive input and stay away from, situations like a hug, for example, because it's a stronger proprioceptive input than a neurotypical person may experience. this is just, part of my life. And I had definitely known about proprioceptive things that I had averse sensory reactions to. Not until literally writing this script did I ever put together that my experiences in video games, positive or negative, could ever be influenced by my autism. But yeah, think about it. My strong aversion to these galaxy breakdowns and my deep immersion in Breath of the Wild probably come from an overreaction to proprioceptive inputs via my autism. So I'm interested to see if any other autistic people have experiences similar to me, or even more interestingly, if neurotypical people also have some kind of corollary to this experience. Please sound off in the comments. This is maybe the most interesting thing I've ever thought about. Moving on. If you're interested, I have a couple of examples of sensory illusions in the description that you can go and check out for yourself to maybe get a better sense of what proprioception actually feels like and what it's like for your body map to change. But if you've experienced any of the things that I've talked about so far, you hopefully by now have some kind of idea of what proprioception actually feels like. In Galaxy, via visual and auditory stimulation, your mind incorporates the little red man into your body map. In order for a game to create this kind of proprioceptive feedback, for one thing, I think it's important for the control over your character to be both specific and highly variable. The games that I've experienced this most in are 3D Mario games, Breath of the Wild, and Super Smash Bros., which I play competitively. In Breath of the Wild, you have very precise control over aiming and shooting with a bow and speed while flying. In 3D Mario games, you have basically infinite variations on how far you can go with a long jump. And in Super Smash Bros., your ground and airspeed are highly variable both in and outside of different characters. These games reward you for putting a lot of time in by giving you that proprioceptive feedback. It feels good because it's immersive. Once their mechanics become intuitive, games can become exponentially more fun. Looking back on the disorientation attack from earlier, you could say that the reason it feels bad isn't just because you made a mistake, but because what you did was intuitive on the same level as any real-world action. It would be roughly analogous to kicking with your left leg, but the right leg moves instead. Okay, so we have a working model for why games can feel bad. If you're playing intuitively without thinking about your inputs at all, and what you see is different than what you feel, that's gonna hurt. The next step is to look at where these intuitions are coming from, and this can vary widely based on context. As I mentioned in the last section, the first water level in Mario Galaxy is in the kitchen, which is the third area of the game. By this point, most players will be playing intuitively to some degree, and the water can be a big uncomfortable change for that reason alone. Your controls are completely different than when you're on the ground. This can be plenty disorienting, I'm sure, even on the first time. The thing is, though, is that the precedent that the game establishes is not the only precedent you have to consider. Most players probably have a couple other 3D games under their belt, and probably Mario 64 and Sunshine. All of game history is influencing your expectations, and therefore your precedent. There are some things that are so ground level, supported by every precedent that I can think of, that to change them would be insane. A set of conditions so bad and so wrong, down to the very core of Mario as a character, bad enough that I gaslit myself for years about what was going on with this mechanic. The information I am about to describe may be too intense for some audiences. I was deeply shocked myself. Viewer discretion is advised. Part 4. The Deep End. When I was originally writing this script, this section was going to look very different. For me, the number one biggest problem with Mario Galaxy swimming mechanics is jumping out of the water. I did all this researching and all this theorizing to get to the bottom of why jumping out of the water felt so bad. I had it narrowed down to the underwater control remap. Remember that they had mapped swim forward onto the jump button. You swim forward with A, and you jump with A. There's your problem. I'm getting close to the surface, and I want to jump. Okay, Sam, you know how to jump, so I press A. But the problem is, I also wanted to jump in a direction, so I hold forward on the stick, and then press A. Holding forward on the stick angles me down, and that A press now accelerates me underwater. This happened to me basically every time I tried to jump out of the water in all of my casual playthroughs and in all of my months of speedrunning the game. But honestly, after thinking about it more, I have sympathy for the devs here. A solution is really tough. You have the A button bound to two incredibly core actions, and they're trying to do the same thing at roughly the same time. It's a difficult problem, even if you catch it. A hotfix or quick solution is not going to solve this problem. So, I was ready to let the video end there. But I was deceived. Get out of here. Box. Okay. Hi. Welcome to the problem zone. This is where the problems live. There is a problem with the next section of the video. It's not a disqualifying problem to my thesis. Wow, that's cool. Thank you, phone, for ringing. There's a problem in the video. It's not a disqualifying problem by any means. My thesis statement still stands, and Mario Galaxy Swimming is beyond broken. But I should say now, because it was pointed out to me by my music designer, MCMooshroo, who watched the video right after the first upload, that I was wrong. And I was wrong, and it's my fault, but it's also Galaxy's fault, so let's talk about it. In the next section, we're going to be discussing how Mario can't jump out of water, and the various ways that they disguise the fact that you can't jump out of water. I lied. You can. Technically, you can jump out of the water. This is my fault. I feel bad. I'm sweating standing here in my PJs. I feel bad that I got the misinformation wrong, and that's why the video's coming down, and that's why I'm putting this section in, and blah, blah, blah. You know, you can't just put lies on the internet, all right? You got to do your best to correct information as you go. So this is what this is. We're talking about it. The way that you jump in Mario Galaxy is ridiculous. I couldn't have come up with a worse way to implement it without actually taking it out. The way that you actually can jump in Mario Galaxy is by holding down the A button for almost a full second. It takes a full second, and in my years of playing Mario Galaxy and in all of my research for this video of playing Mario Galaxy, recording footage, testing different things, I never once ever thought to do this. And that is the ultimate proof that there is no less intuitive thing that they could have picked. You know, my criticism of the jump is that the way they've built it is completely unintuitive and makes it feel unresponsive. And this is worse than anything they could have done, besides outright remove it, which is what I thought they did, but instead they buried it under, you know, miles of jank. So there's all that jank that we're still gonna talk about, all the different variations on jumping out of water. That stuff still stands. But you're gonna hear me in the next couple clips say a couple of times that you can't jump out of the water. And it's not true. You can jump out of the water. So, my bad. It is still wrong. I would like to say that jumping out of the water still represents the biggest problem that I have with Mario Galaxy Swimming. It's insane that even through the process of making this video, I was unable to find this mechanic because, it's not easy. You can hit A and try and jump multiple times, and unless you sit there and hold down the button for this long, jump. So hopefully this doesn't ruin your enjoyment of the video. I don't even know what to say. They got me. They hid the mechanic so well that even a guy making a video about mechanics was unable to find the jumping mechanic, which should be theoretically the easiest thing to do as Mario, the guy who jumps. Well, whatever. Draw what you will from this, but I just wanted to fix the mistake, because you can't just leave mistakes in your videos. You can't just leave massive mistakes. There's very well possible that there are other mistakes in this video. I won't be like, I'm 100% Mr. Confident guy, but this was big enough that I needed to fix this, and it was brought to my attention a mere like 2 hours after I posted the video, so yeah, whatever. It's fine. I'll fix it, and I'm sorry if I sound annoyed, because I am a little bit. I'm annoyed at myself, and I'm annoyed at Nintendo for their design being so bad that they actually made me into a liar. That's the end of the problem zone. Carry on. Damn it. Let me explain from the top. Nintendo did catch the problem with the jumping. They didn't know how to reconcile the A button's two functions in water. What they did is completely asinine. Jumping out of the water will simply be impossible, with the exception of when Mario is touching a wall. And it all makes sense. Those thousands of missed jumps throughout my lifetime playing Mario Galaxy weren't missed jumps at all. I only thought that I could jump. After I corrected myself from the first failed attempt, I was already next to the wall and able to complete the jump easily. This is literally insane. First of all, jump next to a wall is already incredibly unclear and vague. It's somehow distinct from the separate get up out of water animation that can play when you're near a platform. Why? Why are these not the same animation? Why can you jump near walls and ledges of platforms, but you can also normal get up on platforms? And this is all without even mentioning the 3 other ways you can jump out of the water. Let's talk about them now. The phony jump replacements. 1. Shell jumps. This is a weird mechanic. When you're swimming with a shell and you breach the surface, you go in this big arc. This is the secret shell mechanic that we neglected to talk about earlier, and it's honestly not that bad. It's the best jump replacement that exists in the game. You can also do it without momentum when you're sitting on the surface by pressing A, which, first of all, looks really weird, but also stop making A jump if I can't jump with A. 2. The spin. You can breach the surface by spinning. This is kind of like a jump. It's hard to control, and the camera has a hard time keeping up with you. And you have to shake the Wii remote at the same time, so this one gets a C. The third secret jump is also the spin. If you're floating on the water and shake the Wii remote, Mario will jump out of the water just a little bit. I wasn't sure if this was a real mechanic or some kind of bug in the physics engine, because this is about the same amount of height you would get from an aerial spin. You see, there was a point in researching this video where I had already written the vast majority of the script, and then I left and kind of abandoned the project for a year. I came back to it about a month ago and started working on the video again. Now, when I got around to looking through some of my footage, I was worried because I saw what looked like normal jumps in water. Specifically, in the Freeze Flame Galaxy, I saw what looked like multiple examples of me jumping out of the water. The problem is that those weren't jumps. I went back into Freeze Flame to test. Pressing A still does nothing. You can jump next to walls, which is fine, but when you're in the middle of the water, pressing A does nothing. So I tested the other fake jumps, and it turns out what I was doing was shaking the Wii remote. Now, this shake is incredibly deceptive, and basically the proof that they didn't want you to notice that you can't jump out of the water here. When you jump into this cold water in Freeze Flame, you're getting immediate negative feedback. They know you're going to press the buttons very fast, and you're going to try and stay out of the water as long as possible. This is how they hide your jump. When you want to jump in that Freeze Flame water, you won't be next to a platform. You'll just be in the middle of the water. So if you press A, you're not going to jump. But that's not all you'll do. You'll want to jump and then spin to try and maximize your distance that you cover before you re-enter the water. So they mapped jump to spin because they knew that if you jumped and spun, it would be kind of laggy and weird, but your brain wouldn't put together that the A button hadn't actually jumped. You actually jumped when you shook the Wii remote, not when you pressed A, but you did these things really close to each other, so you kind of jumped the gap. I promise you, in this footage, I am not pressing A at all. I'm just shaking the Wii remote. And oh my God, they hid the jump so well and never tell you how to do it. This is a video game conspiracy theory. I cannot believe how well they actually hid the lack of a mechanic here. What the fuck? The worst part of this is that they had options and they didn't have to hide this lack of a mechanic from the player. You could, at any point in the game, have stopped things and shown the player how to jump out of water. You jump with the spin. It's not that weird, it's like a lot of strange decisions in video games. It's something that you accept. And if they tell you to do the thing, you'll do the thing. And you probably wouldn't ever think about it again. But that's not how Mario works. These games are so often iconic because they don't have to stop and tell you how to move. 3D Mario is so brilliant and so immersive precisely because it plays with your intuitions, and you can effortlessly control him in these 3D spaces. Stopping the game to teach you how to jump out of water would break the flow and break the immersion. So no, we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to find ways to disguise your intuitions as correct gameplay. It's never going to work seamlessly because the mechanic isn't there. But what remains, the player will attribute to their own misinput rather than the misdirection of the game development team. In the end, swimming is a small part of a game that I still love to this day. But somehow, every single thing is wrong. I was sure for years that this was just the inevitable clash between control and intuition. Surely, frictionless immersion in a 3D space is impossible. But then, I played Super Mario Odyssey. Super Mario Odyssey somehow fixes every problem that I had with Galaxy swimming mechanics. I obviously can't justify spending as much time on the fixes as I can on the problems, but oh my God. The very first time that I switched from Galaxy to Odyssey in order to compare something, I knew I had to make this section. To summarize the last 40 minutes into one complaint, it would be that Galaxy has unintuitive water controls. Odyssey feels so much better, and it's because the water controls are an extension of your ground movement. They erased the plane controls. To move in a direction, Mario needs only hold the stick in that direction. The A button, which previously accelerated Mario, now is remapped from jump to swim up. This is brilliant! By splitting horizontal and vertical movement, Odyssey solves the core problem with Galaxy's water design. In Galaxy, when you jump into the water, you're playing a completely different game. In Odyssey, the transition is seamless. Another change. In Odyssey, the camera is pulled way back and is fully under player control. This is somewhat afforded to Odyssey by the fact that its water levels are larger than Galaxy's, but the change is amazing. Your inputs actually control Mario relative to your perspective and not his, and this, I think, is crucial to maintaining positive proprioceptive feedback. Odyssey also managed to not sacrifice any of the water movement that exists in Galaxy. With the exception of the spin, all of the core mechanics are still there. Dive down is still mapped to the same button as the aerial ground pound. Z in Galaxy, ZL in Odyssey. But in Odyssey, there's an additional stroke of genius, which is that swim forward is mapped to ZL plus A, which is the same input as Mario's aerial dive. Both of these actions are stall, fall, and cancel into forward movement. Oh my God, they found a way to transport every single one of Mario's aerial movement abilities into an underwater version. This is good game design. The proof of this is how Odyssey feels no need to teach any of these mechanics to the player. Every single person who jumped into the water naturally and intuitively understood how to move Mario through the space. If that sort of player-driven learning sounds inefficient to you, then you've missed the entire point of this video. The reason I've spent thousands of hours just running around and jumping in Mario Odyssey is because of its amazing intuitive design. It gives me such great proprioceptive feedback precisely because of the work the developers put into these controls. No piece of my movement in or out of water requires a tactical thought. So it turns out, Mario Galaxy is flawed. My experiences and memories of it as a child did not necessarily all hold up to scrutiny. But it doesn't matter. The best part about art is that it's iterative. Galaxy got to improve upon its predecessors, and Odyssey gets to improve upon Galaxy, and we get to look forward to that hypothetical Odyssey 2 because, provided the developers are willing to take that harsh look at their past work, there is nowhere to go but up. Hi, thanks for watching my video. All the way through. I mean, a lot of people watched some of it, and those people don't deserve, much credit at all. But thank you to you for actually watching the whole thing. I made the decision to not use my mic for this section because, this is like the real deal. So it's just the audio from my phone. Hopefully it's not a disaster. I'm sorry if it is. I have literally just, you can see it right there, finished editing the video to the point where I am happy with all of the parts that are in it. So that feels good. It took a lot longer than I wanted it to. Obviously, I haven't been working on this video for a year, and I talk about it in the video, but I abandoned this project for a long time. Only recently, when I encountered some, inspirational material, did I sit down and decide that I'm gonna, actually get my ideas done. Because I have not just this video, but a couple other videos that are complete in their thesis statement that I desperately want to create because they are, literally poisoning my mind. And to carry them around with me any further is completely unsustainable. So yeah, we need to make those videos, and this is the first one of those videos that I'm making. Right off the top, I would like to thank my producer, Preston. He came on at the same time that I decided that I was going to pick back up and start working on these again, just to, help keep moving me along and be more project-oriented, more deadline-focused. Just have somebody who is involved in the project who can see more than 48 hours into the future, because I cannot. That was excellent. And also, thanks to MCMooshroo, who did all of the music for this video, just like he did for the last one. Except the difference is this time, it wasn't just music from his album. He actually wrote stuff for it. And it sounds great, so thank you, Mooshroom. I wasn't even sure if I wanted background music for a long time because I couldn't figure out how to make it work, and then I put his tracks in it. It just fit seamlessly. So, thank you, Mooshroom. You did a great job, and hopefully he'll continue to do music for this channel. I thank you to Stomp. It took so long to film and edit this video that I got a cat in the interim. So I have a cat now. You saw him in the video a little bit. His name's Stomp. He's cute. He's actually a very noisy cat, so we got lucky that he didn't make too much noise now or during the filming. Yeah, thank you for being my cat, Stomp. Right, let's talk about the future. I don't intend there to be another year-long gap between uploads, so if that was your, stipulation or why you didn't want to subscribe, then, put those fears to rest. The next video is, like I said, its thesis statement is assembled. I'm going immediately into production for that video, literally after I click upload on this video. And I have been working on it for over a year at this point. So it's not like almost done or in some state of completion, but it is, there's a lot of work done on it already, and that's why it's the next project. I don't want to talk too much about it. But it is a similar thing to this video, which is kind of the standard going forward. It is, deep critical analysis of art. So it is that. I guess I can say it's a very in-depth analysis of a show, a television show. We're going to be going pretty deep into it. It's going to be pretty long, unfortunately. This video is already twice as long as my last one, and the next one will be at least twice as long as this one. I'm not like long video man, but sometimes you have a lot of stuff to say, and there's no other way around it. You have to make a longer video. So there you go. That's the next project, and we're going to start working on that immediately. I expect it to be done in like 2 months. We're shooting for the end of February because we have a release window that we need to nail. Maybe that's a hint for some of you, but there's we really want it to drop around February 28th or 9th or whatever the end of February is. I have no idea. So that's a hint, maybe. Aside from that, we have a couple other things planned. I've got the next, 6 months of my life planned out, at least as far as this channel goes, and because I just desperately need to get these ideas out of my head. I don't know channel longevity after that point, but I have a couple of things that need to get made, and then we can reassess at the end of that. But I'm not going to drop this project anytime soon, and I've got some people to help me out and make sure that I don't. So that's the end of it. Excellent. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.